If you are listening from Nigeria or from the West and Central African region, if you're in any other part of the globe, I think it may just suffice to say, top of the day. Today's event, the Nigeria LPG Assembly, is an initiative of OTL Africa Downstream, which promotes business and policy in downstream oil and gas markets across the continent. The event is brought in collaboration with key industry partners who will be listed shortly. Today's event shall be moderated by Mr. Emeka Akabogu, a commercial and business lawyer of more than 20 years standing, who is more widely recognized for his expertise and specialization in maritime and shipping law. He is also the chairman of OTL Africa Downstream, the initiators of this event. Join me as we welcome Mr. Akabogu.
Thank you very much, ARS Conference Services, for that great opening, which is a very nice way to kickstart today's event. A couple of years ago, I acted as counsel to NIMASA in the detention of several NLNG vessels arising from a tax dispute between the parties. Barely 3 days after the detention orders were issued, the country was gripped by a severe threat of cooking gas scarcity. My further investigation at the time unraveled a supply chain that was clearly deficits in crucial supplier and off-taker assets and infrastructure. Some years down the line, today, the narrative has changed somewhat, but hardly enough, with implicit contradictions arousing more curiosity than alarm. The statistics suggest that the country is currently doing about 1 million metric tons of LPG annually, which is up from about 90,000 metric tons in 2010. Market penetration stands at about 5%, with cylinder density of 4 million out of 200 million in 2018. So there is neither a statutory nor policy-driven price cap, unlike the situation in PMS, which has led to accretion of investments in that subsector. So you would say that with all these, why is the LPG market not awash with cash, investments, assets, and infrastructure? What is happening exactly in the regulatory space? And what is the thinking of government? What challenges are operators facing that has resulted in the muted and almost whimpering response to that huge market opportunity? Why has the transition from dirty kerosene to clean and cheaper LPG been slow for families, not just in rural areas, but also in urban and semi-urban communities? What are other countries doing that Nigeria is not, resulting in a per capita penetration that, if you look at it, is lower than the sub-Saharan average, considerably lower than the West African average, and at 2.3 kilograms, barely 2.5% of the average of North African countries such as Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. So these are the posers which, among other things, have occasioned today's assembly by the industry. The entire industry is represented on the panel this afternoon, and we're grateful for the collaboration of key industry. The National LPG Expansion Plan in the Office of the Vice President, the LPG National Gas Expansion Program in the Office of the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, the Nigeria Gas Association, the Nigerian LPG Association, the Nigerian Association of LPG Marketers, and of course, the World LPG Association. Our panelists for today are equally thought leaders and key influencers in the industry groups I have mentioned above. And I will try and introduce them briefly. They include Mr. Dayo Additional, who is the program manager in the National LPG Expansion Plan of the Office of the Vice President of Nigeria. Mr. Additional has been across different sectors and has had the privilege of studying in key global institutions, including Wolverhampton, University of Wolverhampton, and the College of Petroleum at the University of Oxford. He has been the past president of the Nigeria LPG Association and was president up till August 2017 when he was appointed as a program manager in the National LPG Expansion Plan of the Office of the Vice President. You're very welcome, Mr. Additional. We also have with us this afternoon Brenda Ataga. Brenda Ataga is the National Project Coordinator of the LPG Gas Expansion Program in the Office of the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. She has also served in this office as Special Advisor on Downstream and Infrastructure from 2015 to 2019. She's a midstream and downstream commercial strategist and the 2018 nominee of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu Fellowship. She holds a BA in Administration from the University of Lagos and a BA in Business Management from Lincoln University and an LLM from the University of Salford. Brenda Ataga, you're very welcome. We also have with us this afternoon Audrey Jo Ezigbo. Audrey Jo Ezigbo is the president of the Nigerian Gas Association. And she has over 26 years of experience working as Deputy Managing Director, Falcom Corporation Limited, a company which she co-founded in 1994. Falcom Corporation Limited is a certified and wholly indigenous midstream and downstream natural gas and energy services company. Audrey Jo Ezigbo is an accomplished professional and holds several master's degrees in finance, marketing, and business administration from the Lagos Business School, the University of Nigeria, and the Nnamdi Azikiwe University. She also has certifications from Harvard, IE, and IESE business schools. She's been recognized as one of the leading Ladies Africa 100 Most Inspiring Women in Nigeria for 2019. You're very welcome, Audrey Jo Ezigbo. Also with us this afternoon is Nuhu Yakubu. Nuhu Yakubu is the president of the Nigeria LPG Association. He's a seasoned energy and power business development and management expert with over 20 years industry experience. He has hands-on multi-sector experience cutting across the energy sector in the upstream, downstream, as well as the power sector in Nigeria. He has attended a range of management training and technical courses locally and internationally, including at the Lagos Business School and the Texas A&M University. He is the Group Managing Director of Banner Energy Limited, a gas and power infrastructure development and trading company, which owns and operates a huge network of LPG retail trading infrastructure in Nigeria. He's a Justice of the Peace also. So you're welcome, Mr. Nuhu Yakubu. Also with us this afternoon is Joy Cheyenne, who is the Nigeria Coordinator of Women in LPG. Joy Cheyenne is a Nigerian business executive and LPG enthusiast. She has a background in engineering and over 12 years professional experience spanning logistics and terminal management, business development, project finance, and project management, majoring in the oil and gas industry and specific to LPG. Her job currently entails her deploying her passion, which is raising awareness on qualities of LPG. And she does this in the translation of the goals of the women in LPG. In 2018, she was recognized by the World LPG Association as a Women in LPG role model. She also serves on the council of the Nigeria LPG Gas Association. You're very welcome, Joy Cheyenne. We also have with us this afternoon Mr. Oladapo Olatubosu, who is the Deputy National President of the Nigerian Association of Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers. Oladapo Olatubosu is the Chairman and CEO of Dapnic Enterprises Limited, as well as the National Deputy President of the Nigerian Association of Liquefied Petroleum Gas Marketers. His company is a downstream incorporated company in Nigeria. And personally, he is a chartered accountant and fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. And is also a member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. He's an alumnus of the Obafemi Awolowo University, from where he holds a master's degree in business administration, and has worked for over 15 years in the banking industry in various capacities. Very welcome, Mr. Olatubosu. Also with us this afternoon is engineer Nwaoma Olujie, who is the group head LPG and state coordinator for Lagos State of the Standards Organization of Nigeria. Nwaoma Olujie holds a master's degree in metallurgical and materials engineering from the Enugu State University of Science and Technology. She has held several positions in the Standards Organization of Nigeria across different zones, including Head of Management System Certification, Head Customer Feedback and Collaboration, Head Product Registration, and a range of others. She is a fellow of the Institute of Customer Service and Trade Management and currently represents Nigeria in the African Regional Organization for Standardization, Technical Harmonization Committee on Automobiles. Very welcome, Nwaoma Olujie. And finally, but certainly not the least, we have Michael Kelly. Michael Kelly is the Deputy Managing Director of the World LPG Association, which he joined in 2006 as a Director of Market Development. He has extensive international experience in environmental policy, public affairs, and communications. And he has focused over the years in his career, interfacing between business, government, and civil society. He was previously a policy manager for the Environment and Energy Policy portfolio at the International Chamber of Commerce. An international affairs master's graduate from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., Michael is fluent in 4 languages and has lived and worked professionally in the US, Japan, Taiwan, Italy, the UK, and France. So these are our speakers for this afternoon, and we're looking to have a very, very interesting time this afternoon. So very quickly, we'll go to our discussions by starting with Mr. Dayo Adesina, who, as I've introduced him, is the Program Manager for the National LPG Expansion Plan. So Mr. Adesina, we've been discussing all this while about the industry and focusing on LPG expansion. Could you give us some overview of what's been happening in this industry in the course of the last few years and what the current state of play is? Dayo Adesina, please.
To start off with an awareness campaign which involves three different levels of activity. So the government itself needs to be educated, the industry needs to be educated, and the people need to be educated. What do I mean by this? If you're going to roll out a campaign of this size, you need for the various government agencies to understand the roles, the critical work that they need to do to make this work. You also need to involve the state governments and the local governments. That's on the government side. On the industry side, the industry also needs to step up in terms of the quality of the equipment that are required, the transparency that needs to come with playing as a sector player, and then the people also need to be educated as to the tools that they will now be required to use. Because LPG is different from kerosene, firewood. With kerosene, you can get a Coke bottle or a pure water sachet, and then pour your product into the stove. But with LPG, you need either a cylinder or a tank that feeds your stove. Now, how will people who, in some cases, have never seen a cylinder, how would they know what to do to attach the cylinder to the stove? How do they realize that the hose that takes the stove to the cylinder has a lifespan? How do they know what regulator is a genuine regulator? So there's a whole lot of work, and that's why I said the enlightenment campaign is for 3 levels. Furthermore, the biggest problem, the biggest challenge is funding. At some stage, I'll put you through what we're doing in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adesina, for your intervention. We'll come back to you in a bit, and depending when we come back to you, we'll be glad if you could just try to work on the mic, because even till the end, people were having problems hearing you very clearly. So, but before then, let me go to Brenda Ataga, still on the government side. I'll go to Brenda Ataga. Quickly, Brenda, if you could just unmute your mic so we can hear you when you get on. The Ministry of Petroleum Resources, we're aware that it recently announced a cylinder policy. And I'm sure many of us would like to get some better insights into the nature of this policy and what the intentions and plans are. If you could just speak to that, please.
Okay. First of all, I would like to clarify that it isn't a cylinder policy. It is the Honorable Minister announced government's strategic framework in executing the national gas policy as approved in 2017. So it is our implementation plan as government. Our role primarily, as you know, will be to set the framework for the industry, to support the guidelines, creation of the guidelines that would manage whatever implementation private sector will undertake. So government has taken a position that to execute resolutions in the acceptability and accessibility context of the LPG space, we will introduce into the market the model known as the recirculation model. And this is because we want to eliminate primarily the bulk cost of switching from kerosene and fossil fuels, biomass fuels, into LPG. So the intention with our introduction really is to break that barrier with LPG cost make sure that upfront bulk cost to the end user who today requires switching is removed as a bulk cost to them. The second thing is to eliminate the haziness around the structure of the market today. So the structure of the ecosystem today, you have a lot of roadside sellers, you have the unlicensed decanting businesses. There's been a lot of arguments on what is the cause of the incident. You don't have traceability when it comes to the sector's value chain. The government's intention is to use this framework to resolve most of these issues. Eventually, what will happen is to create a market-led sector where the marketers really drive the distribution and refilling of LPG using the cylinders, canisters. I believe that once we put that in place, what will happen is we begin to tackle the issues around, the perception issues around safety, the perception issues around cost as well, because for most people, cost is a real issue. For most people, safety is a real issue. And that is what our intention is with this strategy that we've announced.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brenda, for that. Very soon I'll come back to you on that, because there are quite a couple of questions that come readily to mind, particularly on the subject of how well this will cover the country and the details of the costing, really. But just have that in mind as I go to Audrey Joe Ezigbo, who's the president of the Nigerian Gas Association. Now, this is not, the Nigerian Gas Association is very important, but we have seen historically that there's been a tendency to focus on upstream gas within the Nigerian gas policy narrative. Given the considerable last mile leverage that LPG has, Ms. Ezigbo, don't you think it's time we start mainstreaming LPG policy within the broad context of gas?
Okay, thank you, Emeka, for this question. Now, granted, historically, we have focused on upstream, and really, I think it's important to sort of set the context to understand why that has been. We only discovered gas because we were prospecting for oil. Back in the day, once we found crude oil, it became the cash cow, and gas was being considered as a nuisance product. We didn't see it as a fiscal resource in its own right. If you even look at it from the point of view of the regulations, legislation, from the Petroleum Act of 1969, it was all about oil, 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 not recognizing gas as a hydrocarbon. And this didn't begin to change until about the early 1970s, the late 1970s actually, with the Associated Gas Reinjection Act, and then subsequently into the 80s and also 1992 when we then put in place AGFA. It was actually that AGFA, Associated Gas Framework Agreement, that opened the pathways for us to begin to see gas utilization projects come more and more to the fore. The ELPS pipelines, the National Gas Master Plan of 2008, and so on and so forth. So really, we have always been a kind of an oil-centric country. And even as we started to discover gas, we have been focused on the associated gas itself. Now, how does that impact on the LPG space? So LPG, obviously, as one of the subsets of gas, has suffered from this same lack of the focus. But at this point in time, the question is, why don't we start mainstreaming? I actually am of the view that that mainstreaming has happened, except that it's happened late. If you look into the national gas policy, from the comments that Dio made, Brenda has also spoken of the same thing. If you look at the national gas policy, section 8, actually subsection 8.4, clearly encapsulates a broad LPG policy with very clear goals and objectives. And that policy speaks to increasing domestic utilization of LPG, whether it's for the domestic purposes itself in the households and things, for power generation, for auto gas, for industrial applications. It speaks to issues around cylinder manufacturing, safety regulations, and so many other things. So we have actually come finally to the place where we have mainstreamed LPG. Now, even with the LPG expansion programs from the VP's office, now with the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, one thing is that we're very clear as a nation of the fact that LPG, we need to do more with it, and it's one of the agents of transformation of the economy. The only thing is that, like Dio said, many times we don't seem to understand how extensive and expansive the work that needs to be done is. In a country of 200 million people, and the level of penetration is just 5%. Now, if you flip that and look at countries like Brazil, that have about same 208 million population, but they have a 95% cylinder LPG adoption rate. So the numbers we're talking about are not different. And the journey from where we are to where we need to be, it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of work. But I am personally encouraged with the work that is being done, and kudos to all the agencies that are involved. The LPG Association has been phenomenal in this regard. I think we're on the journey. What is important for us now as a country is to ramp up the pace at which we are doing the implementation of the goals and objectives of the LPG policy as embedded in the national gas policy. Thank you, Emeka.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Zipo. It's good to know that at least we are on the right track. Question is how quickly we can get to where we want to get, given the large space in between. But we'll come back to you on that shortly. And in the meantime, I'll put this question to Nuhu Yakubu, who is the president of the Nigeria LPG Association. And I'll be going very quickly into very dirty and muddy details of operations. Trucking is currently the only inland transportation mode for LPG. And this results in high transportation and retail prices, from what we understand. Does the industry have a position on the use of pipelines for transporting LPG? And does the, to what extent, of course, Mr. Ezibo has mentioned it a bit, but we also want you to throw some light on the National Gas Network Code and what has to do with LPG transportation. No, Yakubu.
Meka, thank you very much, and thank you to the entire OTL team. Kind of had difficulty signing in, so I hope it's resolved now. On the transport side for LPG, I don't know if the land transportation adds more, has a higher factor on the pricing than shipping. All right, so any which way, transport does have plays a major part in deciding the pricing of LPG in Nigeria. Local transportation, as it is from point to point, from terminals to filling plants or to retail facilities, is still largely by land transportation, like you said, even though there could have been, there's opportunity for railway transportation as well as for pipeline transportation as well. But the network code is what it is. I'm not an expert in the network code. We are all still studying it. It will be, in my view, from my own experience in dealings in natural gas, it portends a much cheaper way to deliver gas, LPG for that matter, even though it will require some boosters from point to point. I'm sure Mrs. Ejibo can lend her opinion to that, since it's a heavier fuel. But of course, it's doable. But can we even consider the use of LPG pipeline for delivery of natural gas, and then let us do the other traditional things we are doing to promote the use of LPG outside natural gas? It's like we're trying to, we're just like jumping the gun if we're going all the way to pipeline delivery for LPG. All right, for the way LPG is delivered right now is getting to the people, but we need to strengthen, like Mr. Zipo just said, ramping up the pace. Ramping up the pace, in my view, would then be across board, all the thematic subheads that we have identified for promoting the use of LPG and deepening the use of LPG in Nigeria. And that includes availability. How available is it? If all Nigerians were to switch over to, if 50% of Nigerians were to switch over to LPG today, we will revert back to almost 90-something% in importation of LPG for domestic use. Because right now, domestic LPG consumption is supplied by maybe 40-50% local supply side. The importation of LPG applies to the balance. All right. So if we are going to be working on availability of LPG, it means in-country production of LPG has to be ramped up from fuel producers to more LNG facilities or more refinery facilities have to come up to bridge this gap. Otherwise, in no longer time to come, we're going to be having issues of supplies that were taken care of by the reason of intervention of NLNG. I think we might just be dropping the ball if we don't do something seriously about supply side now. Now, I can tell you something, back to back, the demand for LPG has been growing in Nigeria back to back. As you heard Dio said earlier, we're at about 860,000 metric tons now, from less than 70-something thousand metric tons we're at 10, 15 years ago. That portends a lot of growth for this market, and largely by private capital that has driven it. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to see government agencies looking at each other and speaking truth to themselves and speaking truth to the issues. Because we often find a situation where one government agency is doing one thing, another agency of government is doing something else. We have a situation where we have, as a policy of government, the ministry will be rolling out a program, or the presidency is rolling out a program, or has a focus on a certain way LPG penetration should be told, whereas you have the regulators doing it in a different way. But the NLPG has done something which is very phenomenal, which is the manner and ways, means and ways that we have been able to engage not only the regulators, but also the policy players in the government side, by bringing all parties to the table as regularly as we can to see how we can address those issues, identify those gaps, all right, and then address them. And I can tell you that the cooperation has been phenomenal. Yes, for example, you heard Brenda spoke earlier about the cylinder exchange program, but we're not too clear yet. For issues like this, when they come up, what we do is we engage. We say, okay, look, we're not sure what you mean by this. Can we understand this? And so long it's the moment to understand it, once the industry has a buy-in, we're able to give the government the required support the industry needs to give to the government so the government can drive its program. But it's essentially a private sector-led industry. I don't know if we should be talking about pipeline for LPG for now, but of course, if it's feasible, of course, I believe it should do good for the Nigeria LPG market. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nu Yakubu, for that insight. At least we know that for now we're good. Let's not have the pipe dream of pipelines yet. Okay, but very quickly, a lot of the expansion or suboptimal expansion has been also been put to the suboptimal awareness. And I'm putting this question to Joy Cheyenne, who is for women in LPG in Nigeria. So Joy, why do you think it's been so difficult to have women, particularly in the rural and semi-urban community levels, transitioning to LPG? I mean, we heard Dio say that, I mean, we still have up to 35% of people using charcoal and probably similar numbers using kerosene. So what's the problem exactly?
It's been difficult to reach for a myriad of reasons. Supplying LPG in a sustainable manner to rural areas there's so many challenges, and like Dio said, the problem is complex. First of all, there's road access. Some villages, you can't even access them by foot. You also have the issue of cultural biases. Some of these women have historical traditions that they do not want to lose very quickly. Added to that, some of them cannot even afford the fuel. Consumption levels is low. So it's a very complex problem. And you can't even ask private sector investors to come into the picture because uptake is low, risks are high, and returns don't add up. And it is in situations like this that we actually would need the government to come in. When the government comes in, it becomes very easy for the other stakeholders like the private sector investors, stakeholders like women groups like Women in LPG. Women are very critical to LPG development because over 80% of the LPG that we use in Nigeria today goes for domestic cooking alone. And let me put that in context. In a country of 200 million people and a 10% penetration, of the remaining 90%, 49% are women. We're talking about 88 million women that do not have access to LPG. It's a huge number, especially when you look at it from the perspective that it is just for domestic cooking alone. So it would involve all of the stakeholders, interest groups, the government, private sector, regulatory bodies. Regulatory is always very key for rural areas. And I would share the example or give an example of the Mission Smokeless Village that happened in India, where the Indian Oil Corporation was able to convert rural villages. I'm talking about people that don't even use firewood. They use cow dung and chulas to cook. And they were able to convert those villages to the use of LPG. But it was a concerted effort between the government, advocacy groups, private sector, suppliers, so much so that women in those communities were able to save time and move from just being consumers of LPG to being very active members of the LPG value chain. So I think that a concerted effort would be required.
Okay, thank you very much, Joy, for that perspective. Let me go quickly to Olatu Bosun, the Deputy National President of NALPGAM, that is the Nigerian Association of LPG Marketers. Now, the issue is, while we are all very keen on expanding LPG penetration, we also have to be concerned, shouldn't we, about proliferation of unregulated LPG retailers with the attendant risks. So, Mr. Olatu Bosun, what's your opinion on the school of thought that suggests that increasing the entry barriers, will work against, or rather reducing the entry barriers will work against the federal government's target of deepening LPG usage in the country?
Yeah, Emeka, thank you. And thank you, everybody. My listeners, that are about 400 now, we all appreciate you. And I think your question is well noted. I'm coming to answer your question. But I don't want us to move away from the theme of this assembly. That is developing Nigerian LPG market, which is critical. I represented Nigerian Association of LPG Marketers, and my presentation should be from that perspective, on what my members are saying, how do we move the industry forward. Like the previous speakers have rightly identified, the level of utilization was quite low years back, and now it has increased. Use of LPG as a cooking gas has come to stay in Nigeria. Both our major cities and the villages, they are embracing it. And at association level, we've tried to do a lot of campaign and make people get more belief, get interested in using cooking gas, telling them the advantages. We've created awareness and we share it, cylinders, all that. That gets us to where we are now. And the volume of gas being used nationwide is increasing, as been rightly identified. But when we want to develop the industry, we see the cooking gas aspect is developing and is capable of being developing. But there are critical aspects that we need to talk on in terms of developing Nigerian LPG markets. And I will want to talk on that one. Before I come to your question, I don't want to lose the track. I noted your question and I will do justice to it. But in developing the industry, it's not just only focusing provision of cylinders, but identify the critical issues. The cooking gas aspect of LPG is already developing and that's capable of growing. It will grow. But there are other aspects that we are not looking into. And as an assembly, it should be our concern that how do we harness the opportunity in this sector. I want to see a situation where I see all my tricycle in Nigeria run on LPG. The generators in our home are running on LPG. The trucks conveying goods all over Nigeria are running on LPG. And what makes it easy for them is when we get issue of supply resolved and there's abundance of supply. Investors are numerous. People are willing to invest in this sector. My members collectively have invested over 200 billion into this sector in terms of providing plants, accessories, cylinders, and all the rest. But they are willing to do more if the opportunity is there for them to harness other aspects of LPG. That is how we get LPG on our hot tricycles, the generators, and everywhere. These are the potential that are even greater than the cooking gas. Unless we focus issue of cooking gas, it has come to stay. People have embraced it, and we are agreeing on that. But the other aspect that hasn't been developed, right, identified by one of the speakers, these are areas that we should not tap into. And it's a critical concern that we should know what to do to exploit that. If supply is guaranteed, it's better for us. Why do we import gas into Nigeria? If we have the largest deposit in all West Africa, and we are the largest importer of gas, at the same time largest exporter of gas, what an aberration. Opportunities are banned here. NLG is doing a wonderful job on LPG. They've just increased the quota, but that is not enough. There are other oil exploring and gas exploring companies like Shell, Chevron, all the joint venture of NNPC. Let the gas be domesticated in this country. If we have gas in abundance, people will see the opportunity to invest on other sectors that are lacking. And a lot of people will embrace and invest in it because there's a guaranteed return of investment for them. They will like to put their money to it. But where we have terminals, we have tanks that are dry, it becomes an issue. Investors have to think twice. Do I need to put money into this? So the issue of supply, like Nuru just identifies critical. And I want to see how we domesticate our source of supply. We don't need to put pressure on our foreign exchange if we are meeting all our local demand locally. If you follow the trend now, the price of gas went up now. I mean, just recently. Why did it go up? It's foreign exchange exposure. The impact of foreign exchange went up. And if you want this thing to develop, it must be available to everybody, no matter the level of your income. And everybody should be able to use it. So these are the critical areas that we need to talk to. I wouldn't want us to mention only problem. There should be solution. And I think the second part of this discussion, we should be able to talk about the solution. And coming to your question about the barriers and retailers.
1 minute, please.
Okay, just 1 minute. About the barriers and the retailers. The existing provisions of DPR, the barriers we are having now, have adequate rights. The problem we have in implementation, if we all adhere to the provision of DPR for LPG and the retailers, we won't have problem. The retailers we are talking, they have certificates, they are class C. There are requirements for them to be set up. But who is implementing, who is following up? DPR come out with a robust guideline. If we all implement it, there's no need for anybody. More barrier is just an witch hunting. It's just, I mean, Nigeria, let's forget our perspective. The more the barriers, the more you challenge Nigerians to think how to breach your barrier. Make it simple, affordable, and they will comply. So the issue of retailers of time, I mean, I'm not part of the school of thought that additional barrier will do the wonder. No. What do you want them to do? We don't want them to discount it. Yes. The regulation, the Lancet grade C they have, told them the limit they can stop. Who is taking that? Who is adhering to that? Those people who are getting, okay, next. So we are right to round up. The next time I have opportunity to talk, the issues I've identified, the solution to them, and we talk more about these retailers and other professions. Thank you all for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Olatubosun. Yeah. You've raised very important questions, and it was only natural that I should go to Engineer Oluje of the Standards Organization of Nigeria. So Mr. Olatubosun has said that the problem is not the existence of relevant standards. Rather, it is one of implementation, enforcement of the standards. And so I put this to you as the issue is that, you know, there's considerable skepticism among LPG consumers bordering on risks associated with safety in operations and handling. So what is your assessment of the role and impact of the regulatory activities in the industry, including by the Standards Organization of Nigeria? Ms. Oluji.
Good afternoon once again, everybody. I want to say that Standards Organization, being a strategic partner, has been playing a tremendous role in the industry. The Standards Organization, established by the federal government with the sole responsibility of elaborating standards for raw material, for processes, for systems, for products and measurements, do not elaborate standards alone. The Standards Organization, in collaboration with the stakeholders, through technical committees and mirror committees, elaborate standards. Why do we engage the stakeholders? Because they are the operators, they are the implementers. So worldwide, elaboration of standards are not done by the standards body, but by the stakeholders. And a lot of standards for the LPG sector industry has been elaborated by the stakeholders, covering LPG itself, the gas, and the LPG equipment for the stakeholders uptake. Now the stakeholders are to take these standards and implement the standards. Standards Organization, in order to ensure that international best practices are put in place in the local markets, we adopt international standards because we represent Nigeria on the International Organization for Standardization and also the International Electrotechnical Commission. Not only that, an affiliate member to ASME and ASTM. These international standards elaborate standards that are used worldwide, and we have, like I said, have adopted them. And SON again, in order to ensure conformance to standards, certify LPG products, LPG equipment, like the cylinders, the pressure vessels. And these are done under two schemes, the Mandatory Conformity Assessment Program and the Offshore Conformity Assessment Program. So LPG cylinders imported into the countries or locally manufactured in the country. Right now we have two LPG cylinder manufacturers. So the LPG cylinders manufactured locally are certified under the MANTA scheme to ensure that these cylinders comply with the standard and also to ensure the safety of Nigerians. On the offshore certification, these are done before the cylinders are brought into the country. Because to ensure also accuracy of measurement, it is very, very important because the LPG, you can see the measuring equipment, the inspection and test equipment such as pressure gauges, the volume indicator, the volume, the temperature. These parameters are very, very critical to ensure safety. So there is need for calibration of these equipment. So SON, in its role, does this calibration through the National Metrology Institute that has its headquarters in Enugu, which has capabilities in volume, in force, in pressure, in temperature, in electrical quantities, physical and chemical quantities. So it is important that that the pressure vessels that are installed in Nigeria, that they meet the certification requirements, which we have been doing over the period and we continue to do. We also ensure that there is competence, the accreditation, because the SON activities, if you look at it, revolves around the four quality infrastructure, which is the standardization, the conformity assessment, where the certification program is falls under, and inspection and testing, and the metrology, which has to do with the measurement. the accreditation is very, very critical. Each of these quality components of the quality infrastructure is very, very critical to the LPG sector. So, and that is why we have midwifed the national accreditation system that should be able to look into the technical competence of personnel and institutions. What is indicates is that when a laboratory, when a person or a certification body is accredited, what it shows is that that institution or personnel has the technical competence to do whatever it's doing. And in order to ensure that we don't work in silos, we do a lot of collaboration with the NLPGA, the LPG Association, the NASDAQ, DPR, that's a regulator, that a joint working committee was constituted by Standards Organization, so that we work together, we understand what the issues are, and try to address them at the working committee level. We have talked about the cylinders, which if I'm giving opportunity again to talk, I will talk about the cylinders, the need for these cylinders to be requalified, because cylinders have a lifespan. The standard that
yes, Mrs. Oluche, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in the next week. Just hold your thoughts on that for now, okay? Thank you very much for your intervention. I just wanted to have a good first circulation among all the speakers. And on that score, I'll ask Mike Kelly now. I mean, we've heard quite a bit, and we want to get a perspective from a global point of view, so that, you know, if you're in a situation, you may not be able to get the complete understanding of what's happening. Senegal, for instance, has a much higher level of penetration as far as LPG is concerned than Nigeria. Egypt has an 85% level of penetration compared to Nigeria's 2.3%. African countries, some of which seem to be at a lower level of income, seem to be doing much better than the countries Nigeria is doing as far as LPG penetration is concerned. From the perspective of where you are, what do you think that these other countries are doing right, which could be done in Nigeria to ensure that we'll have the kind of penetration that we're looking at?
Excellent question, and thank you. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Thank you once again for inviting me to this prestigious event. It's always good to be speaking in Nigeria. I'm not in Nigeria, but with my Nigerian friends. You know, the question of how to increase penetration of LPG is one that, at a global level, our industry has always struggled with. And as you pointed out, there are some examples of successful countries, and you mentioned Senegal, Morocco, actually, which has the highest per capita consumption of LPG in the world. And then earlier, someone mentioned Brazil, another excellent example of a very dynamic market, big country, topographically complicated country where there's a high level of penetration, 90+% of Brazilians cook on LPG. India recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, has gone through a massive program where they brought 90+, so they claim, percent of Indians now have access to LPG. This is one of the reasons why Prime Minister Modi was reelected with such a strong majority in the last election, earlier last year. And a lot of these countries have done this using subsidies to incentivize the use of LPG. This is a difficult issue, a complicated issue, because it's difficult to put subsidies into place and then take them away once they're in place. And we've seen this over and over again. In India, in the past, there have been governments that have actually fallen when they talked about reducing LPG subsidies. In fact, the only example I know of a country who instituted a subsidy system and then took it away in a very methodical, disciplined manner and still has high levels of penetration is the Brazilian example. And I would encourage Nigeria to look at Brazil as a template on how to grow their markets and how to achieve an extremely dynamic market with high levels of penetration and wonderful levels of innovation. the beyond subsidies, the single biggest factor in growing an LPG market in a sustainable way is clear government regulation and enforcement of those regulations. You have to have good laws on the books, and those laws have to have teeth. And if that happens, it will encourage investment. It will encourage the market to self-police, the players in the market to self-police. You'll start to see consolidation with smaller players leaving the market and bigger players coming in that follow the best practices that can be provided from the global market, the global industry. But that is the single most important factor beyond costs in getting an LPG market to grow. And then the second step with regulation is to ensure that you have appropriate infrastructure. Often we see in developing countries the infrastructure bottlenecks, whether it's off-taking facilities, whether it's road transport, it increases the cost of LPG to the point where it's prohibitive for anyone outside of urban areas. And so from a government point of view, make sure the regulatory structures work well, make sure the infrastructure is there. Make sure you have a credible national LPG association, which Nigeria does have. That is a central point the government can contact and speak to. And so the government understands how to regulate the industry, and the industry communicates its needs to the government in a way which, as much as possible, is not confrontational. Those are the things that, from a government point of view, from a policy point of view, the industry and the government should be working together to try and achieve.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike Kelly, for that insight. I'll come back to Dayo, and I hope, Dayo Additional, that your mic is better now, because, you know, Mike Kelly has pointed out a number of solutions, and, you know, some of these also involve money. Our researchers dug out a statement credited to you some time ago to the effect that about $6 billion is required to develop infrastructure to enable Nigeria achieve a 2023 local consumption target of 5 million tons of LPG. Now, you know, it's not just about throwing money at problems. I mean, would you give us some insight into what key areas you think that this funds would need to be injected into to ensure that we've got a strategic approach to resolving the problem?
Okay, I'm sure you can hear me better now.
It's much better. Thank you very much.
I was using a major screen, but I've moved to my laptop now. Okay, first of all, let me correct that statement. I never said 2023. I said if we took a 10-year plan to get to that 5 million ton market that we were thinking of, the required infrastructure that's required would cost us at least $6 billion. And if I can share a screen, but unfortunately I don't, I'm not that tech savvy. I would have shared that with you.
Yeah, you see share screen at the bottom of your screen. Just click on share screen.
I have, but it's saying the host disabled attendee screen sharing. That's what the message says. So you need to disable me for me to be able to share the screen.
ARS, please disable to enable Dayo share screen, please. Okay, I think you can continue, and once it's resolved,
okay, anyway,
I'll prompt you. Yes.
So the various parts of the value chain. My good friend from Nalgan said something that was quite instructive, and so we're looking at the textile industry, we're looking at the power sector, we're looking at the tanneries, we're looking at transportation, auto gas, we're looking at agro-processing, and we're looking at infrastructure.
I think I'm trying to share the screen now.
Okay, let me allow me. So are we there? Yes, I think we are. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. So that gives you an idea of what, like I said, Dapo mentioned that we should be looking at other sectors, and we are looking at other sectors, but also we need to ensure that that supply is maintained, because if you don't, then this is just an exercise in futility. And so we are also looking internally to domestic supply sources from all the producers who are also exporting at the moment. Apart from that, we're also encouraging marginal field operators. There's at least, at the last count, at least 3 of them that have started looking at producing LPG for the domestic market. So this big target that we've set ourselves as a country can only be met if we provide the infrastructure, like I said. And we sort of allocated volumes to different areas, potential volumes, if you look at the screen. But let me go to the next slide. So like I said, textile industry, we reckon that there's a potential to have 500,000 metric tons deployed in that area. If you revamp our textile production, you can create almost 450,000 direct jobs, and massive opportunity for LPG to be deployed for heating, for cooling, and for power. There's no gainsaying. The country has been stuck at this 4,500 megawatts that we've heard, and we believe that LPG can play a huge role with captive power going forward. So this is one aspect also, meat processing, the tanneries. We expect that we can change the practices in abattoirs who are using tires to process the meat, which is not healthy. Poses an environmental challenge for us. But this is the slide that I think where the question is as to why we think $6 billion is required over 10 years. And by the way, this is not money that the government itself would be able to. Government is acting as an enabler. This is all private sector driven. Yes, we're looking at setting up a fund where we're raising funding where all aspects of the value chain can access. If we look at the commercial loans from the local banks, then we're definitely dead on arrival. And so we realize that you need to have funding, significant funding from external sources, and we do have financial advisory people who are full-time doing this. So in the production side, more LPG will definitely come from the marginal field operators, from the NGFCP gas flaring, National Gas Flare Commercialization Program, which expects to reduce significantly the gas flaring due to our commitments back in 2015 to reducing additional 20% emissions in greenhouse gases. So that's quite important. Transportation is another area. Right now, everything goes by vessel, comes into a terminal, and then you need to consider marine transportation through internal inland waterworks, moving LPG by barges. So we expect that significant amount of money needs to be deployed, and that money also needs to take care of infrastructure, not just on the end user side or on the operator side, but also on the government side. Michael mentioned about enforcement, which is critical. So the regulatory agencies themselves need to have enough personnel to be able to do that enforcement. They also need a lot of money for human capacity development, which is quite key. And so one of the things we did earlier on when I took over, or when I started in this role, was to ensure that both DPR and SON got observer status with the World LPG Association. That way they can get some aspects of capacity building. We're also looking to partner with a particular government agency and the various associations to be able to have some form of structured training that is very critical for the industry. So
okay, thanks, Mr. Additional. Let's just hold your thoughts a bit on that. We'll come back to you shortly, so we can cover some ground on questions which are being posed by the audience and some other areas that need to be touched on by some speakers. So I'll get back to you shortly. Brenda Ataga, I want to ask you a double-barreled question because of the shortness of time now. So if you could, there are two things. One, quite a number of people have sought for more clarity on the cylinder program which is being proposed. So I don't know if that is all fully articulated yet. So if it is, if you could shed some light. But more importantly, we want to have some insight into, infrastructure. There's been a lot of investment in expanding LPG storage outside Lagos, yet people outside Lagos tend to be starved of products. Is there anything that government is doing along these lines to facilitate increased supply to coastal terminals which are outside Lagos? Brenda.
So the government has reviewed our current consumption rate, and obviously the target objective that we have to achieve 5 million tons. We've looked at the assets that are available, current production inland, and we have commenced speaking with a few of the stakeholders, the government stakeholders especially. The committee, the National Gas Expansion Program, has taken a tour of also the inland production facilities. Truth be told, so you have most of the terminals that are built on the coastal level, but most of the investments are going into inland production. So what needs to happen with investors is look at how the sector is rapidly evolving. Nuhu spoke about the cost of transportation on the overall cost of LPG, and that is a true cost. When we look at it, demurrage and ship freight costs alone take up to 35% of the total cost of your product, your total landed cost. So what we are doing is, whilst we are supporting, engaging LNG, we're engaging partners to finance new assets so that we have the LNG volumes coming to the country. We're also engaging LNG on an option with the Bonny-Bodo Road coming on stream. I even spoke to Nuhu about that, just to share and harmonize the strategy with NLPGA. And we're looking at the various options on how to support the infrastructure deficit. But the truth is, the market will evolve, and the market will move away from the coastal depots to the inland processing facilities. We have the abundance of gas. It makes no sense for us to put terminals at the coastal end while we have gas facilities that are producing inland. What we potentially would be looking at may be a pipeline structure situation. That is not in the works today, but it might be in the future what the government will propose. But today, we do not have that as one of our strategies. Our strategy short term is to support with volumes from NLNG, the other facilities that NNPC has. We're looking at upgrades to those facilities for those to come by ship. But long term, our strategy is to support production of LPG on land, inshore production of LPG from processing plants. And that is what we are assiduously working towards right now.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Mike Kelly had mentioned as part of the challenge, I think Mike Kelly had mentioned that there is the need for increased local production. So, and I'll put this question to Audrey Juezigbo, given the fact that you straddle upstream and downstream. There's still a lot of gas flaring going on, and we've got associated gas, which is part of the production outcomes. Why is the conversion of associated gas and natural gas liquids in country still suboptimal? Why is it still muted compared to the investments in last mile infrastructure?
Right, thanks, Emeka, for that question. Now, a lot of the speakers have said this, the fact that there are linkages, whatever the expressions of gas, from natural gas, be it CNG, PNG, LNG, or indeed LPG, what tends to happen is that whatever is happening in the broader industry then has a direct impact on the LPG sector in its own way. So everybody has spoken to issues around infrastructural constraints, issues around policy and legislation. There are challenges on the investment side of it because we're talking about dollars. So whether it's in terms of accessibility or rates or the currency of the investment and so on, all these are problems that just cut across whatever the end product is. And so when we're looking at associated gas and the challenges that have not allowed the country to leverage that optimally, we see the same things then playing out with LPG. Just the way other gas projects are capital intensive is the same challenge that we have in terms of LPG. Now, when we're looking at the Brazil example, for instance, one of the points that was raised was the fact that, look, it's not good to use subsidies to grow any market. But, you know, we literally missed a window where we could have done that at some point, because the Brazil example was also very similar, again, to what Nigeria is going through in terms of where they were a few years back. And they had subsidized the market up to 2001. And you need to imagine that they were subsidizing LPG while we were subsidizing kerosene. So there was nothing to incentivize anyone to put infrastructure on the ground regarding LPG. There's so many other broader constraints. It was always a chicken and egg conversation. That on domestic LPG was also a huge disincentive to investors. I mean, why would you spend so much money, borrow at unfriendly rates, have a huge foreign exchange exposure, and then some other person can just import product and their landing cost is less than yours? So these are the kinds of things that existed that didn't allow for that sector to develop. And we've still come back to the place now where the broader macro environment is affecting the potentials for that expansion to happen. When we're talking infrastructure, as Dio has shown clearly, we're talking huge numbers in terms of the money that needs to be raised. We're talking about the need to address the fiscal environment, the regulatory environment, and their security issues that need to be dealt with. So it's just been a lot of backlog, but primarily it's all under the umbrella of the fact that we haven't given gas its pride of place over the years. But again, things are turning around. It's just going to be slower now because we're not in as good a place as we were a few years ago. I want to say something very quickly too in terms of looking at how LPG can evolve and looking at the supply side, to say that while the government may be thinking over the long term of a pipeline transportation distribution framework, there are too many technologies that exist now to take away the need for those kind of hard infrastructure to be sunk in the ground, and those kind of projects are never delivered on time. So we need to look at more easier to avail methods in virtual technologies that are available. We also need to look at our rail lines and see how we can move LPG around using our rail lines and be able to take it to areas that are where there is need all across the country. So I just want to leave it at that place for now. But it's to say that as a country, as we are looking at gas, we have to be looking at all the metrics of the broader industry, because it has a way of impacting on all the other variables within the gas value chain. I'll leave it at that for now, Emeka. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ezigbo, for that. Nuhu, you can see that there's just agreeing with you. Most of the speakers have highlighted the importance of infrastructure from the terminals. Now, so the point is, one of the bigger challenges for LPG remains that of logistics. Is it possible to have a whole of industry approach to ensuring that challenges such as berthing space for LPG vessels and storage and distribution are ameliorated, but mainly from that initial end of tanks, storage for LPG vessels, berthing spaces, which are dedicated for LPG, before you start getting to the last mile? What can be done from the entire industry to improve that?
All right, thank you. What we have done at the industry level, up to now, by the way, the most critical receiving terminal today for LPG is the one in Lagos, are those ones in Lagos, serving the ones in Apapa, the NOJ, PW and BOP terminals. We have managed to, over the years, up until last year, been able to then finally secure the government's support to get those facilities available to receive LPG intake volumes or intake shipments. Even though till now it's still a bit of a challenge, not all of them are still in use, but at least in principle, government has, an NNPC has aligned itself to it, and considering that even the NLNG, who is the main market supplier, has intervened in fixing these facilities. So they are still there. Again, also on the supply side, transportation, there's what they call the off-takers, NLNG off-takers club, or NLNG registered off-takers, who come together to off-take products from LNG using a single shipping arrangement, okay, so that it helps to reduce the burden on each and every off-taker. So there's a shared cargo arrangement between off-takers of Nigeria LNG and LNG under the DLPG program. So that's working well, speaking to the issues of collaboration. But on the transportation side, road transportation side, it's still a bit of a challenge, because when the cargoes belonging to individual players bets, and then they have to discharge from facilities, from the terminals, there's hardly
Nuhu, are you there? Okay, I think his connection is frozen.
Log into Chimon's LNG in my own road tanker to deliver, unless, so even though it might be there, but it's not very prevalent. It's not something that we're seeing a lot, and I doubt that it would be a big, it won't be something that we should be experiencing anytime soon. But there's, however, room for increment in the number of LPG road transport vehicles, bridging trucks and bobtail trucks in the market. Even though we've done quite well in the last few years, from where we were below 150 to 200 LPG road trucks, but now we're over 1,000 trucks supplying the market. Still abysmally low compared to the projections of the market, compared to where we want to be, but at least it's progress in the right direction. But away from this transport matter, I could have shared a few slides as well, but I don't know if I have the time. But developing the Nigeria LPG market we have to bear in mind the thematic issue, the thematic subheads that we have been able to articulate the issues under. And if this exercise we have called us on in today is to discuss how to deepen that market, how to open the market and then grow it. I think I want to align with the position of Mr. Oladapo Olatubosu of NAPA. He spoke very eloquently about the alternative applications of LPG, and I have equally resounded that as many times as I've had the opportunity to discuss it. Because if most of us didn't even come to LPG business for the sake of cooking gas. Cooking gas alone is enough meat for everybody. Is enough. The cooking gas market is. If I shared a few slides, if we had just a 20% switch in LPG today, from kerosene to LPG today, we're able to evolve by 2 to 4 million tons for cooking gas alone. But just imagine what will be evolving for auto gas, what will be evolving, what the market will be with respect to for power generation and for industrial application, combustion purposes, for feedstock purposes, and what have you, like Dio said. So we need to address issues of availability, is still an issue. Acceptability of LPG, Joyce Ian spoke about it. There's still some cultural issues where people, even landlords in Lagos, are not allowing people to use LPG in their homes. They make you sign agreements that don't allow you to use LPG in your homes. So those have to be addressed. And also, building codes have to be revised in such a way that LPG becomes a key elements in your submissions for approvals, for building approvals in the country. Okay. And then under acceptability, of course, a lot of awareness propagation, like what we are doing now, conferences like this, we have to continue to engage our people, because the larger population of Nigerians that could be, the demand gap is with the rural population. The urban areas, you have a lot of the LPG penetration is deep, is fairly okay. But if you go to the hinterlands, if you go to the villages and the small towns, LPG use is still very, very sparse. It's not as deep as it should be. So there's need for awareness creation and awareness mobilization to get people to understand. Okay. And lastly, please, the issue of pricing is very important. Like I said, and since you keep bringing me back to the issue of transportation, transportation is a key element in the LPG pricing. Is a key element. You heard Brenda say 35% of the price add up of the price calculation for LPG applies to LPG alone. Applies to transportation alone. So if we were able to fix this transport issue by even allowing more terminals in those areas where LPG is produced, so that shipping transportation for the pricing will be dropped abysmally, and then I think that will add a lot of will help to improve the pricing of LPG in such a way that more people are able to switch over. So building facilities closer to where LPG is produced will help shave off a lot of transport costs vis-a-vis shipping transportation. We then now know that we are grappling with road transportation, for delivery of LPG to home users. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully, if we have enough time in the next wave, maybe when you're taking 1 or 2 questions from the public, you may share those slides. But Mr. Olatubosun, let me come to you quickly, since Nuhu Yakubu has referenced you in this discourse. You were making a point about the subject of standards, but I want you to also come to the issue of cylinder-owned models, the cylinder ownership models. Should it be market-driven, marketer-driven, or should it be consumer-driven? What do you think? Your mic, please unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The issue of cylinder owning model is not a new concept in Nigeria. Let's flash back before the current dispensation, the development we are having now, where we have proliferation of plant and the rest.
We can't hear you very well.
Is it better now?
Mic. Yeah, better, yes.
Okay. Like I was saying, the issue of cylinder ownership is not a new dispensation in Nigeria. If you flash back before the present dispensation, where we have plants spreading all over major cities, people go to Total, they exchange their cylinder, they take it to. You go to Nido, you exchange your cylinder, you take it to. At that particular time, the filling stations are the owner of cylinders. You just go there, you give them. That is the era. Now we are coming to the era of, okay, we want to Nigeria. I think the critical point we should know is that the demography of Nigeria and our cultural effects. A lot of things have worked in some other places. It may not work here. Let me give you a typical example. If I have a plant in Ibadan, 60% of landscape in Ibadan, you can't trace the house with the address. That's the truth, absolute truth. You can't trace that address. You only need to walk when you give you landmark to get to the house. That means the record and data is not there. If somebody comes to my plant, he takes a cylinder away. I don't have his data. Next tomorrow, he moves to Ijebu-Ode with that cylinder. He goes to another place to fill. How will I have track of my cylinder? But the best thing is what we are doing now. Let's improve upon it. Let's standardize cylinders in terms of what comes to the country. Let the government enable the cylinder manufacturing companies, support them in terms of subsidy. I'm not giving, in terms of encouragement, don't let me call it subsidy. This time around, giving them facilities, maybe import duty waivers, tax holiday, enabling environment that will bring their cost of production low. Energy is a major challenge. And you cannot produce cylinder without energy. You need power because it's wet all through. So if government comes in terms of supporting this farm, their cost of production comes low. It becomes affordable. People go to market and buy. Why are people going to buy second-hand cylinders? Because they believe it is cheap. But if a new one is available of standard, that passes SON standard, they will go out and buy that one. They own it. Wherever they move, it's their home. If you want to adopt, you go and pick on. There are challenges to it. Another good example is this. I have a plant. A customer comes to me. Averagely, a home will use 12.5 kg cylinder for 1 month. And when it comes to feed that gas, I make a profit of about, say, 300 naira on that particular customer. So if he comes, he pick my cylinder away. Cylinder is mine. And if you take in a year, the demand will come 12 times. 300 times 12, that's giving me 3,600 naira. How much is the cost of cylinder the man has taken away? What is the probability that after 1 year, the cylinder will come back to me? Invariably on that particular customer, I've incurred loss. In between the cylinder gets fault, the man return it to my cylinder, to my plant, and say the cylinder you gave me is fault, so I have to fix it. Ask the man to bring my, even though because it's my home, I have to fix it. Upon 3,600 I've made per annum on that customer. At the end of the bottom line is at loss. So we look at it in vis-a-vis our cultural setting, our demography. In an estate, a well-developed estate, where addressed are down, people are civilizing and they understand, it could be practiced. But when you want to nationalize the concept, you are bound to encounter challenges. You are bound to encounter challenges. Let's see how we can improve from what we are doing now, how we can bring cost of cylinder down, that it be affordable and the quality will be ascertained. Not all these fake cylinders they bring into the country, but the quality, the right quality will be here. As when we stamp it, government and talk to the manufacturer. Take for instance, sir, in America, the American government subsidize every meal on everybody's table. You know, by giving them money, but directly or indirectly to make sure the cost of producing food is so cheap. Somebody has just mentioned in India that India subsidized gas up to 2001 when we are subsidizing petrol. Government may not come in terms of subsidies so there won't be an abuse, but it's supporting the manufacturers, the local producer of cylinders. We are having them more as still coming. If they produce the cylinder at a very reasonable price, people will go and buy and they will own and they will keep. But no plant owner will buy cylinder for somebody to keep who does not sure that the man will come and feed the next time in his plant. Business is about returns, it's about gain. And then we should look from that perspective. So let's see how we can develop the current model before doing that. And like I said during my intro, the problem of developing this LPG now, to me, I see cylinder as 1 or 2% or whatever. There are other critical areas where we need to establish funds, where we need to concentrate more people will buy. Those areas, when they are well developed, the issue of cylinder will be sorted out because entrepreneurs, investors will be encouraged to invest. The market is so large, the demand is there, everybody will go and get money to invest because there are a lot of opportunities.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are obviously, I'm putting this question to Joy Sharon. There are obviously quite a lot of obstacles which have been highlighted in the course of the discussions. I mean, does it anytime get to seem as if the coverage of the market which we expect, in view of the challenges like poor infrastructure, limited education, lax regulation, in view of all these challenges, does it ever suggest that the achievement of these targets could be a pipe dream, Joy?
I do not think that the achievement of these targets are a pipe dream. Given the numbers and the progress that we have seen from 93,000 in 2008 to 780,000 in 2018. However, I think that we need to take baby steps. I hear a lot of industrialization, technology, and all of that, but those things are expensive. We have a currency that is currently being devalued, and it really doesn't make economic sense. I think that we have not fully harnessed what the domestic cooking market can do to LPG development in Nigeria. So when it comes to issues of affordability, there are microfinance schemes that have worked. And I'm not talking about copying something and pasting, but trying to localize it. And I'll share the experience of one of our members. She owns an LPG plant somewhere in Lagos, and right across from where she owns that plant, she recognized a chain of canteen sellers, all using charcoal to cook. And she approached them, telling them, oh, cost efficiency and all of that, and they liked it. They liked the idea, but they finally came to the barrier of affordability. How do we pay for this? And she said to them, I would offer you something. And I'll call it a very simplistic microfinance model, at least in that example. She said to them, look, I would give you a cylinder, and I would allow you pay a daily contribution towards the ownership of that cylinder over a 3-month period. The second thing she offered to them was, I would give you a daily credit line. What that meant is you come and buy gas in the morning, and you pay for it in the evening after you have sold the food that you cook for the day. The third thing she gave to them was, I will also let you buy in the quantity that you require. Now, all of this came to maybe maximum of 700 naira daily, because these people are low-income earners. They can afford to make a daily contribution, as opposed to the people that cannot afford it altogether. So we need to identify the silos that exist within the markets and find products that we can help to grow within what is achievable, because comparatively, if you look at the sectors, especially in this COVID era, all of those other things weren't working optimally, but every day people got up and cooked food. You needed to eat. So the industries might slow down, transportation might slow down, the tanneries might not be working optimally when we have situations like a pandemic. But people would always wake up every morning and cook. So I believe that there's an awareness that needs to happen, but we have not yet totally maximized what domestic cooking can do for LPG development in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Mrs. Olujie, and I'll ask you a question which is from someone in the audience who asks, I think that's Benedict Anko, and her question is there a way to certify cylinders through SUNCAP certification rather than burden operators with expenses to cover SUN officials for offshore certification? So this is an interesting question which tend to be posed not just to SUN but to regulators who prefer to go out of the country to undertake certain regulatory activities. So as you're answering that question, also lump it in with the answer to the question of does Sun have the capacity to cover the regulatory requirements across the 36 states of the Federation as is required from the discussion so far? Please unmute yourself. Yes.
I have. The cylinders, not only cylinders, LPG equipment are classified as life-endangering products. Initially, when we started the SunCap, we allowed SunCap to be doing that certification. But along the line, because of what we saw coming into the country, SON decided to take on the inspection and certification of these products, the cylinders coming into the country. There are two forms of certification. A manufacturer might request for certification of its plant, where the plant will be audited, and for us to ensure that the manufacturer has good manufacturing practice, the manufacturer can consistently produce cylinders that meet the Nigerian standard. The manufacturer, after we have gone through his facility, then the manufacturer can be certified. And any importer wanting to import, that what intends to import cylinder, can get cylinder from this manufacturer without any inspection. But because we have seen in some countries where Nigerians, because we had a meeting some time ago with the Economic and Commercial Council of a particular country, where we are telling them, why are you allowing a lot of substandard products coming into Nigeria? But they are telling us Nigerians go to give them their certification. So this borders on integrity. There are some manufacturers that when you tell them to produce cylinders that do not meet the requirements, then you see them producing. Take for instance, our cylinders have sizes, 3 kg, 6.25 kg, 12.5 kg, and 25 and 50. These cylinders, apart from the 6.25 kg and 3 kg that's coming in ball valves, you see cylinders coming in from 12 kg, 10 kg, 12 kg. 10 kg is not even in the standard, but people will go and import the cylinder. 12 kg, the one we seized in December and destroyed, a 12.5 kg cylinder that came into the country without safety relief valve. And this borders on safety of Nigerians. So we got it at the port of entry and we destroyed the cylinder. So why we normally ensure that cylinders coming into the country meet requirement is for the safety of Nigerians. We don't want situations where cylinders will come and they have not made the requirement. And on whether SON has enough national coverage, yes, I will say yes. SON has 44 state offices spread across the 36 states of the Federation. And these state offices are strategically located. What we do now is to ensure that we educate the consumers in terms of the safe handling of the cylinders, and the knowing fully well that cylinders have lifespan. A lot of cylinders in circulation are not supposed to be in circulation by now, because the lifespan of cylinders is 15 years. After 15 years, it's supposed to be scrapped. A lot of them are not supposed to be in circulation. Not only that, cylinders, after a period of 5 years, are supposed to undergo requalification to ensure that it's still safe to use. But at this particular point in time, a lot of prospective investors, we are working with them to establish a test center or test centers so that cylinders will be qualified. So our major concern in standards organization is on quality and safety of the product. So that's why we do what we're doing, and it's important is important. I'm serious, because the way consumers handle cylinders, it's something else. You go to the filling station, you stay by the side of the filling station, and you see what goes on. And that's where we come in with also enforcement by seizing these cylinders. Let me also use this medium to tell us that second-hand cylinders are not allowed in this country. Whoever brings them in did not bring them through the right channel. It's not allowed, because their cylinders must have exceeded their 15 years of lifespan. And people will go to countries where they have discarded the cylinders. Nobody is sure whether the requalification has been done on the cylinder, and they bring it and put the lives of Nigerians in danger. So I hope I have answered your question, but if not, let me also know the areas that you want me to throw more light on.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks a lot. Maybe if we have opportunity during the next round of questions, you may want to tell us how come these cylinders come into the country, despite the fact that SON is at the ports, and SON is a crucial part of the clearance process. But just think about that, put that on ice, while I get to Mike Kelly. And Mike Kelly, what has come up in the discussions, both from Dayo Adesina, Nuhu Yakubu, and most others, is the importance of expanding the usage of LPG beyond cooking gas. So the question is, if we need to really get into the usage of LPG for alternative uses beyond cooking gas, what is the strategy to optimize such so that the narrative goes beyond cooking gas to, powering vehicles, to providing energy for buildings and facilities, to manufacturing plants? How do we achieve this transition into new users in Nigeria?
That's an excellent question, and it's for a country like Nigeria, I think it would be an obvious next step. But I think you have to get to a certain point where you can leverage existing infrastructure that's providing, that's serving a domestic market, mostly a cooking market. So around the world, historically, most LPG markets begin as cooking markets. And then once you reach a certain point, because of the flexibility of LPG as a product and because of the amount of different applications that exist, people start to branch out to other uses of LPG, whether they're commercial applications or agricultural applications, industrial applications, or even other domestic uses of the product. But to get to that point, you need to have a robust, stable domestic market where there is no doubt that product will be available. So you have to have the channels of production and consumption that are stable. The government has to be, or the government has to regulate the industry well managed, and then at that point, once you have enough product for the domestic market, then it's relatively easy to start looking at other applications for LPG, and power generation is a great example. Your neighbor, Ghana, currently is building the biggest LPG power plant in the world in Tema. It'll be approximately 400 megawatts. And it was built with the idea that it would eventually transition to natural gas once the infrastructure is put into place. But we estimate that for rural areas, for islands, for places that aren't on a natural gas grid, anywhere from 200 megawatts down is a sweet spot for LPG. It provides clean energy. It runs very, very easily, very similar to natural gas. The OPEX costs for these kind of plants are relatively low because LPG burns so clean. And for a country like Nigeria that's big, that's sprawling, that doesn't have a reliable national grid, it's an excellent alternative to leverage the infrastructure in place for domestic LPG consumption and to use it for another application that the country actually needs. Another area which could be profitable in terms of other applications for Nigeria is in transport. And again, you have to have reliable infrastructure, you have to have assurance that product will come in, and then you can start moving. Mostly the way auto gas markets start is with fleets. So taxis, municipal vehicles, police vehicles, Anywhere you have a fleet that has a central depot where they can go and refuel, generally those are the best ways to start these kind of markets. And after a while, people get used to the idea of an LPG car. Individuals get more comfortable with it. The costs are lower. It pollutes less. And then you can start looking at making a transition to making LPG a fuel being used by individuals as well. And an excellent example of that kind of transition is in Turkey, where more people drive in LPG vehicles than on diesel or on gasoline. So those are just two examples. I always also thought that Nigeria would be an excellent candidate for using LPG for agricultural applications. You know, Dio mentioned abattoirs. And I would think that because you have such a big agricultural sector, that there would be ample opportunities to use LPG in agricultural applications. There's so many, and they're so flexible, and they can be scaled or they can be as small as you like to adapt to big farms, commercial farmers, or to smaller individual farmers. And that could be an opportunity in the future as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, for that perspective. We're going into questions and answers right now, just shortly, and I think I'll be starting maybe first with Brenda before I go to Daya Adesina. But before then, ARS, is there anything that we have for us? Okay, otherwise, so now I'd like to ask you, Brenda, very quickly, arising from one of the questions here is relating to a national plan for a cost-effective LPG regime. And in this respect, the question will be, I mean, we heard Mike Kelly say earlier that one of the strategies adopted by some countries is one of subsidies, providing subsidies. So the question will be, is there a plan or is there a thinking that subsidies for LPG could be introduced for the purpose of ensuring that these challenges, which have been so eloquently articulated by everyone, are narrowed? Is there any such plan in place or any thinking like that in place?
So Audrey had mentioned that, you know, we've gone through a cycle in Nigeria where we subsidized quite heavily products that did not lead to the type of economic development LPG can give us. I mean, subsidies are a good economic tool for any nation to incentivize a subsector, create the skill that's required for growth. But unfortunately, with our macroeconomic situation in Nigeria, our current balance of trade, it is not a sustainable approach in the LPG subsector. What it will do invariably is continue to encourage the importation of a lot of resource that we have domestically. I think for us, in our view, the issue is to focus on strategically developing our domestic markets and looking at it at the entire value chain, rather than give a pricing subsidy which will not work, which today will be eroded by the ingenuity of our current haziness of the subsector. The government is looking at a lot of the things Mr. Olatubosun has mentioned, supporting manufacturers, supporting producers of investors who want to produce LPG onshore. That is where our efforts are going into when it comes to subsidizing. So I could say that we would give a financial subsidy by ensuring that there's access to cheap finance, a single-digit finance. We are working assiduously on that. We've been in discussions with the Apex Bank to support the market in that regard. But it has to lead, it must lead into a sector that is clearly defined. So how many investors, how many banks would invest in a sector where there's no line of sight in terms of the return on investment? Today, there's a lot of erosion to the LPG value chain because of the unregulated and illegal activities that happen. So things must happen in parallel while we provide access to funding as part of our incentives for the sector. The sector in itself has to be streamlined with that funding, because I invest in the sector, I must see a line of sight for my return on investment. How that would happen, we're in discussions with NLPGA. We've had good meetings with them thus far. We're still, it's not a day's job. It's work in progress, and we would finalize that pretty soon. But it's important that we all think about it. The sector in itself needs to be structured in a way that it attracts investment without even the government's intervention. So yes, we will do this to trigger that interest, but structure is important. I like what Joy said. She spoke about a silo that a private investor had identified for, the cylinder exchange program or a cylinder program. But that's just one silo. That's just one silo in one location. There are many of those silos. How do we put those silos and make them an official framework with an architecture that shows a line of sight on how she can continue to replicate that sort of incentive to the market? And she goes back to the bank to get money for it. I can tell you for free, the commercial banks today will not lend her money without a proper architecture to support that, of her replicating it. So what we're doing is putting it together, creating that architecture that supports, beclouding the subsector and its development, and also supports the injection of required finance to increase capital projects and even bridge the chasm between capital projects and the retail end. So today you have people who are illegal all around. There's a requirement from DPR on category C. Well, how many of them can afford the category C equipment? They can't. So they do what they like. The other day I had to call DPR. I was driving and I saw someone in a bus decanting and selling LPG out of a bus, a moving vehicle. But he will do that because he can't afford the category C equipment. What we want to do is bridge that gap with financing. We'll say to the market, and most of it is private sector led. What we're concerned with is that once there's an injection of funds, there must be a line of sight to that return on investment for that funding. So the architecture needs to be revised.
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you very much. It's quite some elaborate insights you've given there. Dayo, additional, I'd like to point out a question which I think we've not touched on it so much here, and it's to do with the pricing based on the foreign exchange markets. So the point has been made by one of the questions here, which is that given that the LPG price is US dominated and the Naira's devaluation is continuing, okay, what's the impact that you expect this to have? And are there any other options on the table to more or less cushion the impact of the foreign exchange volatility on the LPG markets?
Okay, thank you. It's clear that you need to be able to have a pricing index that is not US based as it is today. Why do you have a US based NLNG whose market was predominantly the US Mont Belvieu, was not set up to supply into the domestic markets. It was set up to supply as an exporter, but circumstances made it come into the domestic market, and so they decided to use the same price index minus the freight rate from Bonny to Lagos. Yes, it's not the best pricing index for a country, especially with the swings that happen with winter, summer. But what needs to happen is that a lot of the export is actually reduced significantly with competition from some of the other producers as well. And then inland production significantly increased from other operators, marginal food operators, and an encouragement of more gas projects in the long run. I'm aware that Argos has done a West African price index, and that should be looked at going forward. So yes, for sure, the valuation that you're going to get as a result of currency swings would definitely affect pricing, but also competition would of course, we try not to encourage importation, but you have to also be realistic that current supply cannot meet the overall demand. But long term, certainly, if there's a structured market where the players can see that, and we are beginning to see that already, upstream operators who are actually doing midstream work and looking to supply to domestic markets. That brings a lot of competition. At the few times that the refineries would actually intervene and come on stream, had a significant spike in the price, in the reduction in price, because they came in at significantly lower pricing, and that distorted the market the few times that they actually came in the past. So that needs to happen again, where local producers, and it's only now that, I mean, they're starting to see that there's actually a market, because for a long time, a lot of them would either flare the gas or not even do anything about it. But I can tell you at least 3 or 4 of them who have now done something significant and will be looking, I mean, MPDC, for example, is likely to come in with about 120,000 tons. If you take the Panoshan volumes as well, that brings everything to almost about 240,000 tons. And there are also 2 other players that I know that definitely can come in with volumes at almost about 150, 160,000 tons. So definitely, they're going to see a lot more in-country production. But also, we need to actively encourage a lot of the producers to reduce the exports. And a lot of those discussions are going on.
Thanks a lot, Daya, for that. My next question will be to Audrey Joezigbo. And it's probably focused, it's a question from Dorcas Jimmy. So I'm putting this question to you because I know you also double your initiatives by being very active in the women empowerment segment. So she has asked the question, what are the opportunities for female gas engineers? So I thought you may be interested in putting something there. And as you're doing that, just along the same line of the investor capacity within the LPG value chain. You know, I've been accused of not having enough investors on this panel. So, and that accusation, I guess, is because we have a limited, there's still limited investments in the tank and jetty space for LPG. So do you see that increasing? Do you see that increasing anytime soon? And to what extent will that impact the industry generally?
All right, thanks, Emeka. So to Dorcas, I tend not to see opportunities through the gender lens, quite frankly. So if you're a female engineer interested in the space, I think the first thing is for you to identify where your focus area is. Are you interested in the LPG subsector itself? Are you interested in the broader natural gas segment? And if that is the case, are you interested in upstream, midstream, or downstream? So those questions, to me, it's not about whether you are male or female. It's first and foremost, what competence are you bringing to the table? Where is your focus area? How much research have you done about it? How have you tried to affiliate with some of the industry groups that can bring you into a deeper resource-based, broader networks that can help you to see those opportunities? So I would ask you to look at those metrics. You can join the NGA, you can join NLPGA, you can join Women in LPG, depending on what it is you are looking for. Okay, I honestly don't know how to color technical opportunities through the lens of male or female. If you've got it, you've got it, go for it. Now, in terms of the investor capacity, so Emeka, you said you've been accused of not bringing investors. Well, I am an investor. I'm not just sitting here as the president of the Nigerian Gas Association. I also have an investment right now. My company, Falcon, we're building a 15,000 metric ton LPG storage terminal and jetty in Port Harcourt. And Nuhu, Dayo, they've all spoken to the fact that there are many more projects coming on apart from those that already exist. I think Dayo talked about a couple that are going to be commissioned in Lagos shortly. I know there's the Rain oil plants. There are just a lot of people that have come into the space. And even beyond storage, here we have Win LPG that is represented. One of our members, Mrs. Nkechi Obi of Techno, as you know, has built the first domestic cylinder manufacturing plant, right? So we're very proud of that. And from the point of view of investors, I think all the things that have been discussed here today actually find a place in our conversations, because we are also looking at the credible markets for our projects. That's a big one. So yes, even Joy spoke to the fact that we should focus on cooking gas, for instance. So as investors, we see it a bit differently. We're saying, yes, cooking gas is clearly a veritable viable market. But when you start to look at the economies of scale, then when we start talking about the LPG for power, LPG for other commercial and industrial applications, that's where the real volumes come from. And indeed, the more volumes there are to back our investments, when those economies pick up, then you begin to even see the price dropping for the cooking gas part of that value chain. So it's still important that we approach it from a broad-based point of view. Where we are also as Nigeria, we have to look at those of us who are investors. We're not just coming for the sentiment of cooking gas. No, we are coming because we are talking about infrastructural development of the country we believe in. We are coming because we are looking at the challenges that this country has in terms of employment, and we want to be able to absorb these youths in direct employment, as well as create those multiplier feeder industries and corporations that are going to then employ other people. So we're looking at it as a 360, and certainly everything that has been discussed here, whether in terms of legislation or regulation or the transport and logistics part, we're looking at it. The other day I was listening to, I think, Felix Ekundaya, who is the vice president of, NU's vice president, and he said something on another conference where he said, investors in Nigeria are running this BYOI, bring your own infrastructure framework. Quite frankly, we are also building and running with the infrastructure and market framework. So we are taking it from both sides, trying to help to build the market and trying to build the infrastructure. It's a very difficult space, but I promise you we're very much on the table. And I'm sure if you even profile your, apart from the panelists, if you profile your attendees, you'll find a lot of them are people who have put money on the table. It's very difficult space, but there are some of us who are committed to changing this narrative of LPG in Nigeria. Okay, so Emeka, I think you should know that you're on the right track with this program that you've put together today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know as much, but I needed you to give that explanation. Okay, so thanks a lot for that. Now, Mr. Olatubosun, there is a concern, and it's I think is a valid concern about safety, because we've had unfortunate incidents of fires breaking out at LPG plants, which are located in obviously residential areas. So what is in locating many of these facilities, what are the considerations that go in, and what are the steps being taken from an industry point of view from your association to limit these incidents, which truly are many times very unfortunate?
Well, thank you, Emeka. First and foremost, safety is very important and paramount, and no country, no organization will downplay safety, no matter what it may cost. As we are talking about expansion, thereabout, you should also be conscious of safety. So that's a critical. But when we are talking about accidents in the gas industry, let's look at me in a broader view. There are plants, there are retailers, distributors. We call them distributors, the so-called retailers, and there are terminal owners. I don't think there's any sector of this distribution chain that has not witnessed any accidents. But the question is, what are the measures put in place to guard against this kind of occurrence? If you look in terms of size and resources, terminal owners, they have a lot of things to guide against occurrence of fire. They put a lot of things, they invest in safety. Similar to the plant owners, there are a lot of things that are put in place. And in granting operating licenses by DPR, there are prerequisites, there are requirements. At the point of applying, that is what called suitability report. The first report we get after police report is safety, fire report. So the firefighters company, either the state or federal, will visit the site, look at what are the adjacent structures to that site. Is that site suitable for a gas plant? It's when you get that certificate that you go to DPR. That's when DPR will first listen to you. After that, before DPR issue you operating licenses, they will come and see what are the facilities put in place to guard against any accidents. So all these are in place. However, when accident happens, naturally, it may happen by the operational accident or some other things. But the important thing is implementation to make sure things are actually working. At our association level, we hold meetings regularly with all our members, and it is always discussed there. Even at our resource center that we just opened now, we ask them to send their personnel, try to train them, and we lay emphasis on safety. You don't just say the day you commission it and you forget about it and go and sleep. Safety equipment must be on all the time. Periodically, you check your fire extinguisher, you check your auto shutter, you check your, identify to your standard procedure. That manual that was signed by you and DPR, that this is operation guidelines, this way I operate my plant, adhere to it critically and swiftly. By doing that, certainly you will actually avoid accidents. But in some instances, people, they run foul, and that is why there's always a measure to do that. But large number of accidents we've seen in the recent time are actually attributed to distributors or acetylene gas. The most fatal accident happened this year, the one at Kaduna, where we lost a professor, was actually caused by acetylene gas. The one that happened in Lagos recently was not cooking gas. So gas is general, and the safety of gas it involves all, including the government, the cloud agency, so that we will not play double standard. We must adhere with the laid down regulation, comply with it to make sure we save life and properties. As far as we are concerned in our association, continuously we train our people, we educate them, we encourage them to make sure that they keep to the training, safety measures that are in their plants. And that comes on the issue of development that's coming nowadays. There are a lot of these kids that are placed somewhere without any approval, arbitrarily. That's even another danger, because they did not pass through any test at all. We did not keep short on that. We are shouting, we are making everybody to hear, so that the safety of everybody is paramount. So to wrap it all, safety is a major concern. We all continue to hammer on it, but I believe if you all adhere to the provisions of DPR, the way it's been laid down, and we keep on checking on it, we avoid all these unnecessary accidents. The terminals are doing wonderfully well. They are well equipped, and a lot of things have been avoided at their own head. It's now left for the so-called distributors And that's why you should say implementation. So the agencies should go. But behold, in the next few years, these people will fade out because development is coming. In the cities now, distributors are going down. And other areas, Erica, your time is up. I can see you are laughing. Hello?
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we want to try and round off this in the next 15 to 20 minutes or so. So I'll request the panelists, as they're answering their questions, just to also be making their closing comments. And so the next question is to Engineer Olujie of SON. And the question says, if SON has already, Mrs. Olujie, can you hear me? Okay, good. So the question says, if SON has already visited a manufacturer offshore and an investor wants to import cylinders or LPG equipment from the same manufacturer, will the investor have to take SON to that same manufacturer again? So as I said, as you answer the question, also make your closing remarks, because this may be the last opportunity you may have.
Okay, already I now have two questions. On the first question, if any investor has, any manufacturer has gotten his facility certified, no. The investor will not take some official to visit that manufacturing facility. That's the essence of certification. But if the manufacturing facility was not inspected because of the critical nature of the LPG and the LPG equipment, and to ensure safety, that's why we do what we do, to put in place safety measures. And most times we don't also visit, even if we have not certified a manufacturing facility. Take, for instance, an investor wants to just bring in one LPG tank. Then the responsibility is on you to ensure that the LPG tank or vessel you are bringing into Nigeria, that one tank meets the standard requirements. So an approval letter. Let me tell you, all importation of LPG equipment must go with an approval letter. There must be an approval which will give you the impetus to obtain import permit. Please, it doesn't have to go through SUNCAP. Don't do SUNCAP when you are importing LPG equipment. You first request for an approval to import, after which an approval is given to you, then you will obtain import permit. When you import any LPG equipment and it lands at the shore of this country, then you activate the import permit to be passed for clearance of goods. So I hope you've understood me. If you want to import from a certified manufacturer, SON don't visit, because SON has audited that manufacturer and have adjudged that the manufacturer can produce and consistently produce quality products for Nigerian use. Secondly, on the question of the SON being at the port, that how come, I want to tell you SON is not at the port. Just note that SON only have access to the custom integrated, the Nigerian integrated custom information system. So it's from the system we get to know what and what is coming into the country. But most of the time, the importers do a lot of false declaration. The cylinders that were intercepted in December and destroyed came on false declaration, did not come in as LPG cylinder. I don't know why the importers do that, but it was when it was cleared and has left the port that it was intercepted, and we subjected it to an examination. That was why, and from the import document, what was written there is quite different from what we saw inside the container. So these are the measures that SON has put in place. And let me also want to use use this medium to tell us about trying to understand where to look for the manufacturing date of a cylinder. I said earlier the cylinder
for the lifespan. In 1 minute, please.
Yes, so please, it's either written on the shroud. On the shroud, you will see the manufacturing date, or on the base, the footprint, because there is misinformation going around that you get the manufacturing or the expiration date with an alphabetical designation. It's not. The date of manufacture has to be indicated on the cylinder. So when after this program, check in your kitchen, check for the manufacturing date on your handle or the base, and see whether the cylinder in your house has expired. On a final note, along all the LPG value chain, the 4 quality infrastructure comes to play. And it's important as we expand and deepen the usage of LPG, these quality infrastructure at every stage of the value chain, standardization, measurement, certification, and accreditation plays critical role in the LPG industry. So we shouldn't leave these aspects of quality infrastructure. While we are looking at physical infrastructure, let us know that LPG, Nigeria is a global market. We need to be competitive and become relevant in the global market. So that's my take, and thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Oluje, for also participating. Michael Kelly, just final words from you, and in giving the final words, if you could also give 1 or 2 indications as to ensuring that the pricing of LPG in country is reasonably near to what you have in other parts of the world.
All right. That's easy. Thank you. The price is actually going to be a tricky question to answer. I mean, that's up to domestic politics, and WPGA doesn't necessarily get involved in those kind of discussions, although we're happy to provide benchmarks of what happens around the world. And I think this goes back to the discussion we had earlier, where it takes national government, even in a federal system like Nigeria has, to decide to prioritize and incentivize rolling out of LPG. And I think the indications and the signaling that the government has done through the National LPG Expansion Plan are very clear that this government considers LPG to be a priority. And the results are there. You know, I was in the preamble to this, I was reading about the percentage of growth over the last few years. We monitor Nigeria because it's a country that we think has huge amounts of potential that it's finally starting to reach. And this, of course, interests our global members because if Nigeria is to become the market it should be, it will be an excellent opportunity for foreign direct investment, whether it be in distribution or in infrastructure or in equipment, all of these elements that make up our industry. And the government, through the National Expansion Plan, has signaled very strongly that it intends to grow this industry. And it's being successful so far. I'd say that it takes events like this one to support that growth, to ensure that the communications between the various stakeholders are clear. I'd say it takes a strong and credible national LPG association to be the voice of the industry in these discussions, and I think it takes a program area like the one that Dio Adeshina is leading to ensure that the industry is moving forward in a strong direction, and of course this is backed by the authority of the Vice President's office. So all the elements are in place. And WPGA, which has long been a supporter of Nigeria, my first trip to Nigeria was in 2009, so we've been supporting this market for over 11 years, and we're glad to see it growing, and we're glad to be part of this. So congratulations.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike Kelly, for your contributions. Any final? I want to take final closing remarks from everyone now, but let me start with Nuhu before I get to the rest. Nuhu.
All right, Mika, thank you very much. I actually had I have to run off now because I have another meeting that starts by 4:30. But I'm happy to give my final words, and I want to leave Pat with my words on the LPG pricing again. You asked a question about the future of LPG pricing vis-a-vis dollarized or the naira dollar exchange rate. All right, it's an issue, and it's an issue that we are all watching because, as you know, the domestic LPG supply side is priced on in US dollars. The only reason why you have not seen an escalation in the price of LPG, local price of LPG in naira, is because there has been a commensurate increase in demand. Okay, there's been such a high increase in demand, and then the depreciation of the naira has helped to stabilize the price of LPG in Nigeria. So it's something we're watching, and there's a regional pricing arrangement that is being promoted by Argos. We're looking forward to it. I believe that we're inching towards the 1 million ton target. Once we hit that target, I believe we'll be qualified as a market to begin to have our own pricing platform. All right. So those are my parting remarks, and I wish OTL the best. And I want to thank you all for thank OTL particularly for promoting this webinar session. You can count on me, at Banner Energy. You can count on NLPG all the time, so long as there's discussions that pertain to LPG. You can call on us. We'll be happy to oblige you. Thank you. And I hope the participants have enjoyed the discussions today. I'll be happy to take any question or two before I leave. I still have a minute or two.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Yakubu, for that. Let me call on Joy Cheyenne. Just your closing remarks before we leave.
Let me start by saying thank you for the opportunity to participate. I would reiterate that awareness is very key. WIN LPG is poised to deliver that awareness regardless of what part of the value chain it is required, whether it's to the consumer or even to the sector participants themselves. So on that note, let me say WIN LPG is free to join. I noticed some questions. Some people were asking, can men join? It's actually open to both men and women. So I will look for an opportunity to share our contact details so that you can participate in our programs and organization.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Mr. Olatubosun, I know you've had quite a lot to say, but just give us your closing remarks as we leave.
Emeka, your guess is quite right. No, but let me first thank OTL because you wouldn't allow me time to do that. So it better I do that before it's late. This is a wonderful presentation, and I think it's the way forward. And I hope I know what it goes to have this, but more of it is also solicited. We should have more of this interaction so that we can actually move the industry forward. On my parting note here now, some key is two major issues. One, the supply and the pricing. I disagree with no. We've not gotten the pricing right. The price is extremely still high because we've not fully domesticated our gas. By the time we have our gas fully domesticated, when all the other companies that are exploring gas are selling in the Nigerian market, not to abroad, the price will come down. People that have terminal, their terminal are their tanks are dry. They've invested, but they don't have anything to sell. The only way to let them enjoy their investment and move the industry is to get them wet, and we need to domesticate our supply. Before the exchange risk will be avoided, the industry will increase, we create more employment, and the supply is critical. Whatever the bottlenecks in terms of all this administrative, you can park here, you cannot park here, we have one person, one is coming, another one takes another 2 weeks to come. All this needs to be sorted out. You hear the gentleman that's talking about local politics about pricing. He said he didn't want to go into that. That's a loaded word. So we are Nigerian, we have our country. We must sit down and ready to move. The interest of the nation is more than the interest of any individual. We can get the right price, we can get our country wet by all these products, and we can go into all other areas we've not delved into. So please, let's do well. Thank you.
Okay.
It's nice being with part of you. It's nice interacting with this intelligent panel. Quite educating. I appreciate this. More of it to come. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Latubosun. Before I get to Audrey Ezigbo, may I ask audience if you've not, I think I don't know if the polls are closed, but if they are not, if you've not taken part in the polls, just do so. Mrs. Audrey Ezigbo, I understand from this, Mr. Latubosun has actually posed a challenge to you and other persons who are within the nearer the upstream and midstream segments. He has said that the challenge is the challenge of supply. So in your closing remarks, we'd like you to address this and indicate how you think that, that supply challenge can be finally resolved.
Okay, all right, thanks, Emeka. So in closing, let me say this, that we're all very clear that a 5% LPG adoption rate cannot work. We're all very clear that we need to look at the supply side and the demand side. And he's right about one thing. If we didn't learn anything else about from the pandemic, what we have learned is that we must build our in-country consumption. We can't just be saying we're resource rich. We need to use the resources in country, build our own markets, build value-added products that we can then export and even earn revenue. So that's very true. He's also right that the more we use LPG in country and we're able to supply and produce in country, that the pricing will ultimately come down. And I use the word ultimately because this is then what the issue is. It is the cost of putting the infrastructure in place. I want to remind all of us that we do not manufacture anything in terms of the components. Those of us who are building storage tanks, we are importing everything. So what we have done on our side is to make sure that we are as local content compliant as we can be in terms of the design, in terms of the manpower, in terms of anything that we can do locally. But the key components are imported. What that means is that there is still a huge foreign exchange exposure on the investor side. That means, therefore, that looking at the landscape, the fiscals, the regulatory, all those things still come to bear from an investor's point of view. So it's not as simple as just saying, more of us should invest. Is that, like I said at the beginning, we have to look at the broad ecosystem of gas in Nigeria and begin to debottleneck some of those things. We've been speaking about the same sets of challenges for years. The more we're able to address that, the more it opens up. Many of us who are coming in right now, it's really a huge struggle. Even being able to attract investors internationally, it's a big one, it's a big challenge. However, the same time, there's an opportunity because globally people are trying to move to cleaner fuels. So there's a lot of funding that is looking for projects that have some kind of social impact. And LPG is clearly one of those resources. So we can leverage on that. But we need to deal with that side. The more that area is cleaned up, the more investors come to the fore. I think that if I would close with this, is to say that a lot of work is being done. I want to give kudos to the government, both from the VP's office, from the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and all the industry associations that are involved. But to say that there is a heightened need for collaboration so that we're walking the same journey with the same metrics of implementation and measurement and evaluation. And when we come out with certain policy directions, everybody, there's no uncertainty as to who is pushing what. Once there is more certainty on that landscape, you will see that investments will begin to flow. This is our reality. So it's to look for where are the opportunities to build the markets, and then how can we create an enabling environment more and more so that the investors can come in. When we're able to do the two, deal with supply and demand, ultimately we will begin to see the kind of LPG market in country that we're looking forward to. So thank you, OTL, for allowing NGA to be part of this. As I said, our whole interest is to see how we can make gas a key resource in catalyzing economic growth and development in Nigeria. So we're very happy to have partnered with you on this. And my kudos also to all the panelists. Thank you very much to all the attendees for staying with us to the end. Thanks, Emeka.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Audrey Ezigbo, the President of the Nigerian Gas Association. Brenda, I'll get to you before I end with Dayo. And in making your closing remarks, I'd like you to note a question which someone, or rather a comment which someone made, which is, well, does it appear that the government wants to compete with the private sector by the cylinder initiative which it is proposing? Would like you to answer that as you close, please.
Absolutely not. The government's role in any sector really is to give policy direction and support with strategic framework designed. And that is exactly what we're doing in this. Our role, as I've said before, is to trigger the ecosystem and support the markets with the incentives that we feel are necessary at this point in time. Dio mentioned incentives had been given previously, removal of VAT, reduction of import duty on equipment. We're pursuing more of those sort of incentives to support the market. We're pursuing, access to financing to support skill. But ultimately, from the government point of view, our project-based initiative at this point is to drive market opportunity for the private sector. And that really is what the thrust of it is for us, because the truth is you're closer to the market than we will ever be, top to bottom. It's important that that chasm that has existed in the past between government understanding what commerce is on the street is bridged widely by the architecture of what we're designing now. And in my closing remark, we see LPG as more than a commodity that's being traded. For us, it's an economic tool to enhance our current socioeconomic developmental needs. LPG traverses a lot of the segments that have been spoken about here, from agriculture all the way into power. And so we see it as a catalyst for job creation. We see it as a catalyst for domestication of a lot of our industries. Yes, COVID has taught us a lesson as a country that we can't continue to depend on imports as our mainstay. We need to swim away from that. I like to use the word swim because it portrays exactly where we are in Nigeria. We're battling with a lot of issues, infrastructure, we have the foreign exchange, but we need to understand that we have a direction that we're swimming away from. And that's important for everyone who has listened to us, even the private sector investment. The government is with everyone. We understand the challenges quite clearly. There's been a strong team, and we're supported by the associations. We've had numerous meetings with them, trying to understand exactly where our framework and how it should be designed, where it should be focused on, and how it should be designed. So I'm quite expectant that indeed, eventually, LPG will grow. LPG, with its versatility, will give this nation the economic stimulation that we require at this point. So thank you, OTL, for putting this together, taking on board some of the points. Mr. Olatubosun listed a few of the challenges. I see that challenges must always be, there are resolutions to every challenge. You can mitigate every challenge. So we'll discuss with the association and fairly quickly try to roll out. Yes, the government is also looking at the other segments. We have the autogas coming in play. We're assiduously working on that as well as we speak about cylinders as well. We're also looking at the infrastructure. So yes, we are taking LPG as an economic tool. It's not just a commodity, and we can assure Nigerians that the impact will be felt by every single person in the shortest possible time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brenda Ataga, who is the project coordinator and manager for LPG expansion in the Office of the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources. Finally, may I call on Dayo Adesina to give his closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Emeka. When you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. The federal government has taken this extremely seriously, and that's why it's His Excellency the Vice President chairing an interministerial committee on behalf of His Excellency the President that sits on top of all issues to do with LPG. This means you can coordinate with various ministries to sort out all the problems. My role is to act as an enabler to make sure that this doesn't, that the government meets its target. So huge challenges. If you recall, when I started, I said in an awareness campaign, the government needs to be enlightened. The industry needs that enlightenment, and most importantly, the people. The challenges are quite humongous. So in a situation where a road tanker needs 45 permits to be able to apply its trade in the LPG sector, is totally unacceptable. In a situation where you set up your LPG infrastructure and then several taxes and levies are put your way, acts as a disincentive. So one of the things that we're doing is taking pilot states, and we started with Lagos State, because they need to all understand the role that they play to make sure that the LPG sector is comfortable enough for them to be able to reap the benefits, not just as a government, but also for the people that they superintend. So that collaboration started with an awareness campaign for the state's EXCO. And that has allowed them to chart a way forward where the state will be able to play a role with the LPG industry in moving things forward. That extends to 12 states that we're looking at as pilot states. But more importantly, His Excellency the Vice President sees LPG as a game changer, and he's very keen to see that this market develops with all the expectations that come with it for both the people, the industry, and the government itself. Now, for all those that know me, I'm not a politician. I came from the industry. And so when you called me at 12 a.m. to say, I have this idea, my first reaction was to say, well, wrong with it. You were a bit skeptical. You said you were not sure that we'll get the numbers, but I'm looking at the numbers now. This is 3 hours after, and there's 272 people here. So that shows you the intensity, and this is one of the ways that we can also enlighten the public and the investors and the industry players by this engagement. So I thank you for having faith and believing in this project. And it is one of the ways for sensitization. And I've seen a stream of questions coming back and forth. But let me assure you that my office has supported all sorts of initiatives from the LPG industry, and we will continue to support that. His Excellency would have the greatest pleasure when we can show him that we've achieved, even if it's just half the target that we set ourselves, but more importantly, the entire target that we set ourselves. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists. I've engaged each one of them at some point in time. So I'm quite familiar with everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dayo Adesina, the Program Manager, National LPG Expansion Plan, Office of the Vice President of Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, panelists, first of all, let me extend our very, very deep gratitude to all the speakers today who have taken the time out. It's been 3 hours, and it's not just 3 hours today. In the last couple of days, everybody has been engaged on ensuring that we have an excellent delivery, and we've had a number of engagements. So thank you very much for all joining us. We appreciate the partnership of each and every one of the organizations, which we take as an important step for the industry. And we see the fact that the key stakeholders, both the regulators, the operators, the associations, are all on the same page as far as achieving progress for the industry is concerned. So for me, that's a great indicator of what the potentials are and where we can get as far as ensuring LPG penetration in the country. So we're very grateful once again to the Office of the National LPG Expansion Plan in the Office of the Vice President, the LPG Expansion Program in the Office of the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, to the Nigeria Gas Association, to the Nigeria LPG Association, to the Nigerian Association of LPG Marketers, to the Women in LPG Nigeria, to the Standards Organization of Nigeria, to the World LPG Organization, and to every single person who has joined us today in ensuring that we have an interesting time. The numbers are quite astounding. It shows the interest which we have. Before I give you the final verdict on the numbers, I'll tell you what the polls say. So we had a couple of polls conducted in the course of this session, and on the question of what people consider to be the most common use of LPG, of course, the cooking fuel has been at 95%. And on what is the most effective way of boosting LPG penetration in Nigeria, I think what takes it is sensitization of the citizenry on the benefits of LPG. That takes it at 58% compared to access to credit at 35% and diversification of LPG usage at 44%. And on what is considered the most critical factor affecting LPG as a transport fuel, I think all of the above, 77%, lack of investments and lack of awareness. Then finally, as to whether the event has been worthwhile, 99% said yes, and 1% said no. So that's what we've got. We've got a huge number of people turning out today. We had almost 1,000 people registering for the event. We had about 700 people coming in at different points in time today. We've had more than 700 people coming in at different points in time. At the same time, we've had 394 people at the, together at the same time as it is, and at closing we've got 253 people. So that to me is an indication of the interest in LPG as a subject, as a business, and as a national tool for expanding the economy. And it's also an indication of the level and profile of the speakers that we've got today. So I am very grateful to each and every one of you. And we end this event by wishing everyone to keep safe and keep tuned to the progress in the industry through OTL. OTL will hold usually this year and it holds later in the year, irrespective of the circumstances. We are here to ensure that the entire industry is able to galvanize for mutual benefits, and we look forward to that. So with that, I can only say have a good day to everybody, and good afternoon.